Monocacy Audio LLC presents The Ascendant Project. The mission of the Ascendant Project is to explore the origin of political, philosophical, and spiritual positions in individuals. A contributor writes a 750-word essay and then gets interviewed. The purpose of the interview is to bring out other views and hopefully life experiences that sent the author down the path to the position expressed. It is not intended to be a forum for debate, but rather a project to better explore and understand the American experience. All opinions and views expressed, written or verbal, are not necessarily the opinion of the podcast nor Monocacy Audio LLC. They are also not intended to malign anyone or any organization. It is our hope that personal growth is the result, as well as a greater appreciation for new, unique, and differing points of view. Join us on this journey to ascend to a higher state of consciousness. Feared or loved, USA from the outside. National world events have been moving at a very fast clip, seemingly accelerating every day. As a result, stories that 10 years ago would have garnered large print headlines have become buried by war and threats of war. This essay is an attempt to take a step outside of my experience and my view as a citizen of the United States and look at how the world might see us from the outside. Ironically, though, if you want to be on the outside, you have to be inside first. So I will start with some background on how my worldview formed. World War II had been so devastating to Europe, Asia, and parts of Africa that it was decided that institutions should be put in place to prevent massive war at all costs. Depleted military and economic power had caused Europe to give up its colonies. As a result, African colonies and protectorates would become nations in their own right with their borders left over from the European empires. All these world powers and economic powerhouses were in shambles in 1945, and a new world order was born. America was the sole standing, undamaged economic and military superpower in the world. The United Nations was created, and the permanent members of the Security Council would be the winners of World War II: the United States, Soviet Union, Britain, France, and China. Other nations would take their term on the Security Council as a means of giving smaller nations a voice in world affairs. The United States would help the United Nations craft the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which is considered a foundational document of the United Nations. As the Soviet Union was recovering from their 27 million casualties, their troops remained deployed in the nations they had occupied fighting Germany. These nations would form the Eastern Bloc as they feared the West, and with good reason too. During World War I, Russia had dropped out because of the Russian Revolution. Only 25 years earlier, the United States and Britain had sent troops invading Russia on the side of the White Russian movement. The Bolsheviks won, and Soviet Russia was set up. The Soviets never forgot, although most Americans were never taught this. The distrust between the West and the USSR would lead to a stable, albeit very tense, world order. NATO would protect the West. The Warsaw Pact would protect the USSR's interest. I was born into this world, and it was a world where unaligned countries would be used as pawns. The West looked to the United States for leadership. Boomers and Xers grew up knowing that any international incident on the Korean border or on the Berlin Wall could very easily spiral into nuclear war. Both the USSR and the United States of America had policies of mutually assured destruction, which meant it was in nobody's interest to fight each other. It remains an underlying thread of the conflicts today. As a result, these alliances were sacred, even when they were flawed. During the Cold War, the United States foreign policy was not without its flaws. The Cold War influenced every decision, sometimes at the expense of ideology. The CIA overthrew regimes. After Iran nationalized the oil industry, the CIA overthrew its democracy and installed the Shah as its head of state. The Iranian government then had an oppressive secret police and ruled with an iron hand. When the Iranian Revolution occurred in 1979, the new government remembered this oppression, even while instituting their own oppressive system. And as a result, they never trusted the West. The CIA also overthrew socialist democracies in Guatemala in 1954, Chile in 1973, and whether or not a nation was a democratic republic or not was second to whether or not they bought arms or were influenced by the United States or the Soviet Union. In all these actions by the CIA, the United States acted alone, fostered distrust that would last generations. The writer read a report this morning, which is March 4th, that the CIA is currently arming Kurds to take over Iran. In the case of apartheid South Africa, Ronald Reagan backed white minority government while calling Nelson Mandela a terrorist and a communist. Reagan also labeled the African National Congress a terrorist organization. Although Reagan would eventually call for Mandela's release, South Africa is positioned in a strategically important spot on the globe, and as a result, the United States wanted its government on its side. The NATO alliance has a requirement that all nations use 2% of their GDP for national defense. This 2% is not a fee, as Trump would call it, but rather a target for their own military production. The reason was so the United States would eventually not be the sole defender of their territory. Rather, as these nations recovered from the devastation of World War II, they would become stronger, and the collective defense of NATO nations would be strong enough to repel and counter any Soviet attack. For a while, they did meet these targets, but especially once the Cold War ended in 1989, the nations of Europe would consistently not meet NATO requirement. This, in combination with NATO expanding and after the fall of the Berlin Wall, to the point of open talk of Ukraine joining the treaty organization, led to multiple presidents speaking to NATO nations about their commitments to mutual defense in the form of defense spending as a percent of GDP. Despite defense spending goals not being fully met, NATO became a very effective fighting force. The first offensive operations by NATO was during the Bosnian War, first by enforcing a no-fly zone, and then by airstrikes. NATO would bomb Serbia during the Kosovo War. When America was attacked on 9/11, NATO answered their Article 5 obligations. NATO nations sent troops to Afghanistan and fought the Taliban. Europe and the United States had benefited from NATO. When the nation of Iraq invaded Kuwait in 1990, the United States went to the United Nations. It leveraged diplomatic power and passed resolutions that authorized the Persian Gulf War. 43 countries participated in Operation Desert Shield and Desert Storm to liberate Kuwait from Saddam's Republican Guard. The United States leadership in the world wasn't just in the form of NATO or the United Nations resolutions. It projected leadership in the form of soft power. John F. Kennedy formed the Peace Corps to help develop nations and promote goodwill. The Agency for International Development was created by the State Department. It would be rebranded as USAID and spun off as its own independent agency by the time of Bill Clinton. It is estimated that between 2001 and 2021, somewhere between 4.1 million and 4.7 million lives were saved by USAID programs per year. Ronald Reagan, in his farewell address, spoke of a city on a hill. It was his vision of how he saw America. Here's a paragraph from that speech. I've spoken of the shining city all my political life, but I do not know if I ever quite communicated what I saw when I said it. But in my mind, it was a tall, proud city built on rocks, stronger than oceans, windswept, God-blessed, and teeming with a people of all kinds of harmony and peace. A city with free ports that hummed with commerce and creativity. And if there had to be city walls, the walls had doors, and the doors were open to anyone with the will and the heart to get here. That's how I saw it, and I see it still. Reagan's vision was one of peace, one of welcoming borders and welcoming people. The metaphor has roots in the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5, verses 14 through 16. In Jesus' teachings, it was about living what you believe and influencing the world with your life. A cynic may call Reagan sitting on a hill propaganda. A skeptic might call it hypocrisy. An optimist may call it a vision to aspire to. A realist may say it's all of the above. Trump campaigned in 2016, 2020, and 2024 on the premise that America was screwed over this whole time by the NATO alliance and almost every other international agreement and organization. He campaigned against the North American Free Trade Agreement. The Trump administration also pulled out of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, the World Health Organization, the 1951 Refugee Convention, Global Counterterrorism Forum, and the United Nations Human Rights Council. The Trump administration has widespread vacancies in its diplomatic corps. Over 80 countries do not have a U.S. ambassador, including Germany, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Egypt, Ecuador, Iraq, and Kuwait. Many of the nations that are being attacked today by Iran. Trump is actively working to replace the United Nations with a board of peace. Donald Trump has been named chairman for life. The United Nations has tasked the Board of Peace with rebuilding Gaza and instituting the Gaza Peace Plan. Currently, 22 nations have joined it. 6 nations have expressed an intent to join. The European Union and 10 other nations are observing. 14 nations have declined. And Trump rescinded the invitation to Canada. All these actions represent a withdrawal from the United States from world diplomacy and influence. 3 days into Trump's second term, he cut 83% of USAID contracts. A little over 2 months later, he dissolved USAID and its remaining work was absorbed by the State Department. America's soft power had evaporated. Trump would replace it with kinetic power. At the time of this writing, the United States has attacked Iran, killing its head of state, kidnapped the Venezuelan president, and threatened to invade Greenland just within the last 3 months. Greenland is a self-ruled territory of Denmark, a NATO country. This resulted in NATO nations of France, Germany, Norway, Sweden, Finland, Netherlands sending troops to Greenland to defend the world's largest island from a potential United States invasion. Although NATO still exists, the trust and leadership provided to it by the United States is gone. Ironically enough, it has motivated NATO nations to meet their 2% obligations, with some nations setting goals of 5% of GDP on defense spending, as Europe feels caught in a vice between multiple world powers looking to expand their respective spheres of influence by military might. The strained relationship can be seen in the current U.S.-Israeli-Iran war, with Britain, Spain refusing to let the United States use their bases to land fighters. Britain also refused to provide intelligence on Venezuela leading up to and during Operation Absolute Resolve. But the world doesn't just see the United States through its actions. It pays attention to our domestic policies as well. It sees how the Trump administration handled the immigration issue. The killings of Renee Good and Alex Preddy by ICE are interpreted by the world as an actions of an increasingly authoritarian government. Remember, the government argued in court, and won, that president could order the assassination of a political rival and not be charged unless impeached by the House and convicted by the Senate. In contrast to Reagan sitting on a hill, our borders are closed, and the U.S. government no longer welcomes people. ICE now arrests people who have been in this country decades, even deporting some United States citizens. Our moral leadership in the world no longer exists. Finally, it also be noted how the Epstein files are figuring into how the world sees us. There has been accountability for a prince in Britain, but not for the people in the Trump administration, including the president himself, despite evidence that warrants further investigation. I'm reminded of a scene in the movie A Bronx Tale where a mob boss tells his protege that it is better to be feared than loved. The breaking of treaties, alliances, withdrawing from organizations diving approval ratings, and his recent penchant for military action tells this writer that Trump wants America to be feared and not loved. His Homeland Security advisor, Stephen Miller's theory of the unitary executive leaves little doubt for this conclusion. Our impulsive military actions and the questions of justice domestically very well could lead an outsider to fear America instead of aspire to emulate it. It is a question this superpower has wrestled with since dropping atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Sometimes it feels like America forgets the responsibility of knowing that today's present is tomorrow's history, and that the world never forgets.
All right.
All right.
We're on air.
We are on air.
All
I see
right.
waves and threes. So we got 3 mics going.
3 mics. Big step here, buddy.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're becoming like an actual audio engineer at this point.
Getting closer to it anyway.
Yeah.
Still got a lot to learn.
Oh, for sure. Will that ever really stop? There's always going to be more.
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, I think these waves are looking a little bit better than they were before. So, yeah.
Yeah. All right. So, feared or loved?
Yeah.
That is the question. Anyway, so feared or loved? Why don't you start by just telling us what inspired you to write this?
A lot of it is dealing with the events of the last year in terms of what the United States is projecting to the world or not projecting to the world and just like going through action. So, for instance, we used to have influence, a lot of soft influence, like through USAID, through a lot of organizations to where we would be in constant communication with other nations coming up with conventions and protocols for the greater good. And that's been eroding. And then you also take a look at military actions that we've done over the last year and the threats of military action that we've had over the last year. And just taking a look at how that has eroded what we've built. And then I also mentioned in there the lack of a diplomatic corps. So we are not even in communication through traditional means with the people or the governments of around the world. Everything's just being done through Truth Social posts.
Yeah.
So
it was in that vein that you then wrote this essay. This is quite a long essay. Is this the longest one that either of us have ever?
It might be.
Yeah.
I think it definitely is in the top 5, if not the top 3.
Yeah.
So
probably top 2.
But I mean, I kind of felt like I needed to recount a history in order to encapsulate my worldview.
Gotcha.
Even though there are details in there where the worldview isn't a pure idealistic one, because it shows, where even during my idealistic time, where the foreign policy has been checkered, especially in regards to the CIA.
Well, so
pigs,
Yeah. Well, so you're the full title, Feared or Loved USA from the Outside. So would you say this is outside looking in or just looking outside? It
was actually as an exercise of me trying to take a step outside of myself and see how the U.S. is viewed from the outside. So I had to take a step away from the Ronald Reagan that I necessarily knew growing up, because, I was born in 1973. So when he came into office, I was like 8, and he stayed into office until 1989. Yeah.
81 to 89. Yep.
81 to 89.
8 years.
So at that point, from 8 years old to 16 years old, almost.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a huge time for a kid. That's half a lifetime.
Yeah.
That's half a lifetime.
Yeah.
So that's a huge amount of influence, I mean, and There are things from that era that I remember. Like the first news story that I really remember, I think, was um, the Beirut bombing, where we lost like hundreds of Marines in Beirut on my birthday.
Yeah. Wow.
And that was happy 10th birthday. That was
Yeah.
1983.
Wow.
Um,
Can't imagine.
and I remember, the hijacking of TWA Flight 847. I remember the LA Olympic Games. And I remember, yeah.
Yeah.
Flojo. um, yeah. And yeah, I mean, it's just like, that's the time where, my worldview was kind of being formed. And I had this two grandfathers back to back, with Reagan and Herbert Walker. And, Herbert Walker Bush, he really reminded me of my grandfather.
Oh, yeah.
So, just in certain mannerisms and how he spoke. And they were both of that World War II generation. And, my grandfather had been in the Army and all that. So, I mean, it's just like, I could relate to Herbert Walker Bush pretty well. And it just seemed that, patriotism seemed like family to me because of that, and it don't feel like family to me now. So, I mean, there's a lot that I'm actually wrestling in the subtext here. I mean, just reading the words, it's a very historical, analytical piece. But really what's going on beneath the words is I'm wrestling with a lot of different things.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to look at America from the outside. I'm trying to wrestle with, was America then really the way I remember it? And it's actually multifaceted.
Oh, absolutely.
Underneath the text.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, and we'll definitely dig into some of those. So, and you mentioned actually a few events that you don't list in here at all. So you wouldn't say this is like an exhaustive list.
No, there is so much that was happening in the world that you aren't necessarily aware of,
Sure.
and that things aren't necessarily taught in history books. Like in American history, you're taught about World War One. With world history, you're taught about World War One, and you're taught about the Russian Revolution.
Mm-hmm.
But the way, at least how it is, I don't know how it's set up now, but the way it was set up going through high school and going through college, you had 1 year of before the Civil War, and then 1 year everything after the Civil War.
Yeah.
And the present always becomes the past. The present always becomes history. So really, do we need 3 years now? Or is everything being taught? Because when I was in high school, history stopped at the Vietnam War.
Sure. Yeah. I think for me,
and I graduated in 92. So, where was Reagan in that?
Yeah.
You're not even learning about Reagan. You're just living it. You're just remembering. And
Right.
that's not necessarily the way things actually are.
Oh, sure.
So,
yeah, I mean, so much of history is uncovered over time as people put the pieces together.
yeah.
But yeah, you wouldn't say this is an exhaustive list at all. Like, what are, like, outside of what you've listed here, like, what are, like, the main things that you left out? Like, what?
Oh, geez.
What additional events would you have included?
Well, I'd like to learn more about Grenada. I did not mention Iran-Contra, which definitely could have fit into this essay.
Sure.
I mean, because there we were selling, well, actually the backdrop to Iran-Contra was when the hostages were freed, that the Reagan administration was running their own foreign policy as a campaign before they even took office, and negotiated with the Ayatollah not to release the hostages until he was sworn in. So there's already a backdoor relationship between Ronald Reagan and the Ayatollah in Iran. Iran, of course, funds Hezbollah and other terrorist organizations have been taking American hostages and also British hostages. And what Reagan did is he sold Iran arms. It should be noted that, the Iranian Air Force consists of like F-14 Tomcats.
Yeah. Yeah, it's always kind of bizarre to hear that once you start, like if you think about it beyond just like the surface.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy.
So he sold Iran arms in exchange for hostages release. But the proceeds of those sales funded a covert war in Central America. That's the Contra part. I'd like to learn more about that, but that was huge. And that definitely feeds into today with Iran.
Yeah.
There's a lot more. People think that we're reacting to like things that are just happening, but there's a lot of deep roots in what's happening that go back decades, if not almost a full century at this point.
Yeah.
So that's completely overlooked.
Yeah.
It's why USAID was so important, because our actions can sometimes be erratic and can be very in the interests of corporations or whatnot. But USAID was putting forth goodwill.
Yeah.
And was making a positive impact on the world.
Right.
Which
really influencing the perspective of those looking.
Worst case scenario, it's the oil. That goodwill was the oil, the grease of the bad on the gears of the bad will.
Yeah.
Now there's no oil there, and everything's just like falling apart, and NATO's falling apart, and all that.
Yeah.
Because we're not looked at as a leader.
Well, it's like I always
the appearance of the law must be upheld, especially when it's being broken.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, honestly, there's a ton of quotes that came to my mind. As I was reading your essay, I'll get to some of those later. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely very thought provoking. But it's interesting though. Like we're separated in time by I'm going to say only 8 years. Yeah. But honestly, like I don't recall. You even quoted some of the things from the 80s. I was born in 81. Yeah. And I still don't remember a lot of those. I like the first major world event that I could remember. I can't even really say that I had like a very clear picture of it until more recently, but was Chernobyl. Yeah. And like that was really a global crisis.
It really was.
And it it easily made it into the local news.
Yeah.
So, but that was 84.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right? And then like the next big like event for me was probably like Reagan leaving office.
Yeah.
I remember being, the 8-year-old me, 1989, like crying when Reagan left office. And that was mostly like I had no idea what his politics were at the time.
But that's the type of guy Reagan was. He put forth that grandfatherly.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Everything is good.
Uh-huh.
He wrapped everything in such a positive way. I mean, even like with Iran Contra, I'm not denying anything now. How did he put this exactly? I was not aware that we had done this, but it has come to the attention that I did. I mean, I forget the exact quote, and I think it was like the "buck stops here" speech. Okay. And so that's what he said. Like, yeah, I was not aware that this happened, but I've been made aware that I have that I did it, or something like that. The buck stops here, and so he was able to turn the negative into a positive. I mean,
That's such a political, like, that depends on what the definition of is.
Yeah, I mean, it's like Nixon's checkers speech, where Nixon was, being accused of accepting gifts, and so it's like there is one gift that we were given inappropriately, and that's my dog Checkers, and Checkers came up and like gave him like kisses on the face or whatever.
Uh-huh.
And we are not going to give him back. I wasn't. I don't remember that speech, but I think it was before my time, because I think it was before he became president. I think it was while he was vice president.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, it's that's a very famous speech as well.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, like, but we're sitting here like recalling these events,
Yeah.
right? You know, and our recollection is only so perfect. I mean, as
100%.
as we're discussing them, we're very much like, I don't remember the exact quote. Or,
Yeah, we're piecing stuff together.
Right.
Yeah.
But we're sharing and remembering together. So how much of your recollection of these events is
Accurate?
is that that kind of like naive, youthful perspective?
Well, to my credit, I was looking up dates and stuff up on the internet. I was pulling up a lot of different articles as I was writing this, just
Right.
to keep my crap straight.
Right.
So I think everything that's in the paper is accurate, but everything in this interview might not be.
Well, I mean, it never is, right? That's why we
Yeah.
have our corrections, which are sometimes quite extensive.
Quite lengthy.
You do an excellent job of that, by the way.
Yeah,
I will just
thank you. I appreciate
just
that.
say, yeah. So okay, I've gone a little bit out of order, so I apologize if some of my questions
we can jump around.
Yeah, and I mean, we often do. You know, we just kind of go with it. You say if you want to be outside, you have to be inside first. So
Yes, I
how would you
stole that.
say? Oh, you stole that from who? Who was the original?
It's a movie.
It's a movie.
Uh,
Is it The Notebook?
no,
No,
it's not the Notebook. It's what's that CIA?
It's
that
the Until the
Rock
End of the
did?
World, isn't it?
What's that CIA movie that The Rock did?
Oh man,
Oh gosh,
I don't
Let me
know.
look this up.
It was probably The Rock and Chris Hart.
Yes, it was.
Um,
Yes, it was. Central Intelligence.
Central Intelligence. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so if you want to be out, so why? Wait a second. Okay, so
I want out. Well, if you want to be out, you got to be in first.
Okay, this gives me some important context. So how would you say your experience inside has influenced your outside looking in view?
Well, I mean, that's the nature of introspection, isn't it? You know.
Oh, sure. Well, and this is kind of why I asked you at the beginning, like USA from the outside, is this you looking out, or are you trying to be out and look in?
Well, I'm trying to do a little bit of both.
Yeah.
So is this essay about looking out or looking in?
It's Is it from the inside looking out, or from the outside looking in, or trying to
I'm trying
from the outside looking in while being inside?
Yeah, exactly.
And then
it's
how-
that part, because I'm trying to take a step outside of myself, but in doing so, I got to be sort of inside first, and that's how so I wound up recounting history how I saw it.
Mm-hmm.
Augmented by other things. So
you're inside looking outside looking in, kind of.
yeah.
So like, how would you say, you're obviously you're part of this. Like, how would you say your experience being inside influences your perspective?
Well, so my influence inside, especially like looking back during that idealistic time, I feel like patriotism is freaking awesome and cool and all that, and I still feel that way, 100%. You love your country even when you're criticizing it.
Yeah,
you love your country. In fact, I mean, it's like, at least I do. I feel like a country is a child. You gotta bring it up to where you want to be it for your kids.
Yeah.
It's about your country is about your future. It isn't necessarily about your past.
Right.
Which is why, I really disagree with MAGA, because you're looking backwards as your starting perspective. And I'm like, no, you should be asking what do you want? What world do you want it to be? Not what world do you want to recapture? And this essay really shows, during that idealistic time, the United States was doing things that I probably wasn't aware of at the time. like in regards to Nelson Mandela, my first real exposure to that was on U2's Rattle and Hum album
Yeah.
when Bono talks of, needing to speak. He was talking to Little Steven and the need for economic sanctions against South Africa that Bishop Tutu was calling for. He mentioned that on stage, and like that was probably the first time I became aware of that. And of course, I was like, middle school at that point, 1989. So it was like eighth grade or ninth grade.
Yeah.
So talk about musicians, spreading awareness. People laugh at that and all that, but a lot of kids' first experience of politics and political perspectives come through music. And political acts.
Well, and they certainly did for you and for me, I think, growing up. Now I feel like it's a totally different, a lot of, like, are there popular music? Like how do people discover new music now?
I know. I mean, that's welcome to the get off my lawn stage of life, Julius.
I mean, I accept that somehow people do. Are people just like sharing on social media? Or
I assume, I don't really know. I listen to the radio so little now. I used to listen to it like 4 or 5 hours a day.
Oh yeah.
And now I'm like, I'm listening to XM, and and when I'm listening to XM, a lot of times I'm listening to like the MS Now feed or something.
Right.
And when I am on the FM dial, I'm usually listening to WTOP, which is, news. I mean, it's kind of sad because music brought me so much joy in my life.
Yeah.
And I know that there's plenty of radio stations still out there. I mean, DC 101's still around, but even they play the 90s at noon, you know, and I hate to break it to everybody, but 90s ended 26
years ago, man. Yeah.
It's classic rock. It's what 1960s music was to 1990s.
Yeah. Right.
And it's quickly becoming the 1950s music.
Yeah,
which sucked.
It's
by
just
the way.
yeah. I mean, but I wouldn't necessarily say I'm like get off my lawn, but like listening to the radio, watching MTV.
Yeah,
it was so like ingrained in my psyche that I can't even fathom how it would happen without those things.
How can you like have a political message in your music on Spotify? I mean, Spotify has created so much echo chambers in music.
Yeah.
It's all about your playlist. And, it used to be that your playlist was a mixtape that you gave to somebody. Like, here, this music really is great. And so it was done like, kind of like
peer-to-peer.
Peer-to-peer.
Yeah.
And, Spotify playlists, I mean, when was the last time you shared a playlist with someone?
I don't know that I've ever done it. Maybe with my wife. Yeah.
Exactly.
But, yeah.
It's totally siloed.
Yep.
Music. And it's sad because music is something to be shared.
Right.
And in that sharing, you could talk politics if you wanted to.
Yeah.
I mean, the last great political album that I can think of was probably by Green Day during the Iraq War.
Okay. Yeah. No, yeah. Great example.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where's that gone?
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, but then like kind of bringing it back to your essay, like this, as we talk about how we're here sharing our knowledge of these events, do young people still, do young people still do that? Like, are they,
I wish I knew.
Is it all just coming through social media?
I don't even know how.
Do people watch the 11 o'clock news anymore? Like,
yeah. How do they get their news?
Yeah.
How do they experience history? How are they taught in history? I don't even know how the structure of everything is now anymore.
Right.
And maybe it's just because I have not been paying attention to school boards or whatever. But, is U.S. history split up into 3 years now, or is it still 2?
Right.
Because if it's still 2, all the events post Civil War, instead of getting 2 paragraphs, they're getting 1 paragraph. And if it had only 1 paragraph, it's now reduced to a sentence. And if it had already been reduced to a sentence, it's not even talked about anymore.
Right.
And one of the things that struck me as I got older is every sentence in a history book usually represents thousands of lives.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
You know, and you don't have any appreciation of that, when you're young and immortal.
Well, and that's, then, we could say like, this is your get off my grass moment right now, because then you have to make choices about what you convey, what perspective you're trying to present.
Yeah. I mean, people don't realize, the labor troubles of like the 1890s.
Yeah.
People died.
Yeah.
People died, labor unions fighting the United States government.
Yeah. We got
Labor Day out of it. Does anybody know the history of Labor Day?
No.
Does, I can't wait for Labor Day.
Right.
Yeah, people died for that day.
I don't think people even know you're not supposed to wear white after Labor Day anymore. I didn't. I can't remember when I learned
that was
that
a
fact.
girl thing.
I honestly don't know. I had heard it. It was in a commercial or something I had seen in like.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Who wears the white after Labor Day? I can't even remember what they were advertising.
Yeah. I thought it was like, it's usually women's clothes with that.
Right.
But I don't know how things actually get around. I mean, I know things get around via TikTok.
Yeah.
But TikTok,
we've
had many discussions
Facebook,
about the problems of bumper sticker politics.
Right.
Because you need nuance.
Yeah.
You need to know the subject. You need to understand how things impact others in ways that aren't intended. And you don't get that in a TikTok video. You know? I mean, that's why this is deep form. It's probably why we're not getting any views. but
I like the discussions.
This is like this level of discussion is what's needed. We need to be able to talk about the history because the history influenced the present.
Yeah.
And people are dying in the present because of the history. Iran, why would Iran trust us when we toppled a democratically elected government for oil back in the 1950s? That's why we're at, and
why would they trust us when we canceled the
Iran nuclear deal?
Yeah. Which by all accounts was working.
Yeah. And if Trump is such a great negotiator, he could have renegotiated it.
Sure. I mean, he took NAFTA and basically just called it something
He
else.
trashed it twice, yeah. He renegotiated NAFTA.
Yeah, basically
then he's
doing
like,
the exact
these
same
negotiators
thing.
are horrible. Who would ever do this?
Right.
You did, dude. And so he's renegotiated it again.
Yeah.
I mean, it's, idiot.
But I mean, so this is where I feel like you and I may have a difference of opinion then. And I know
Really?
we don't.
That's great.
Yeah, actually, yeah.
Well,
I mean, I don't want to get into like some deep debate here, but I think it's actually.
Well, we made it how many years?
Well, I think it's relevant to your essay. And I guess I wouldn't necessarily say it's a difference of opinion, but the scientist in me might call it I would present a different hypothesis as to why it's happening, right? As I mentioned, I think before we went on air, I've been looking at the Gilded Age and how the events of the Gilded Age led to the Progressive Era.
Yeah.
And it was in that transition that that labor rights and those conflicts between labor and big business occurred.
Mm-hmm.
It was the overreach, we'll say, of the robber barons.
Yeah.
Which caused the workers to, rebel and revolt, and and that's how we got Labor Day.
Yeah.
Oddly enough, I didn't realize how close to home that was, because that was, I knew it was in West Virginia, but I didn't know it was like over the B&O Railroad and and all of that. And I grew up right next to the B&O Railroad.
So did I.
Like hearing the train go through every few days, like
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. I heard it in Monrovia. Monrovia had to stop at one point.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy to me to think of how close to home that hits.
Yeah.
But But kind of getting back to
Now there's 2 people on a train, and that's it for a mile-long train.
yeah, yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
it's
it
true.
sounds like the robber barons won in the end on that,
Mm,
but, you know.
yeah. But was it ever really true that people spent more than or looked past the headline? They certainly had more time to dig into an issue.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. Of the 1890s, it was probably as close to a free market as we've ever had. And
Okay.
you had rampant adult unemployment. Children, fully employed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because,
Crazy.
I mean, you know, the free market always wants the cheapest labor possible.
Mm-hmm.
You become an adult, you have liabilities, man.
Right.
You know, a child has no rights.
Right. Yeah.
You know, so you can be exploited. That's not your question. Could you repeat the question?
Well, so was it ever the case that people really looked
Look
beyond
past the
the
headlines?
headlines?
I don't know. I mean, but that's
I think it's
a struggle in the end. I mean, but for, you know, even while we were growing up, we had NBC, CBS, ABC,
Sure.
and you had PBS, if you wanted to count that. And, you know, then CNN came along, and then everything started proliferating. And with more choice comes more siloing.
okay.
And so as a result, you know, like when Fox News came about, you know, the instead of the viewership of America, you know, having common sources to look at and talk about, well, now we had a lot more gatekeepers of that information. And so we aren't necessarily dealing with the same sets. And as much as I really, 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 really was pissed off about the phrase alternative facts, that's what that actually is about. It's about siloing of information and not everybody playing, and nobody has the full deck of cards anymore.
Well, sure. I mean, and this is something that I feel like I've, I have an essay I want to write about media literacy, and I know a lot of people look back on the Walter Cronkite era and
Yeah.
as like the peak
But
of American press.
if there's only one trusted source in information,
Right.
you're really going to be able to see the bias in it.
Exactly.
You know?
And I mean, so I feel like there's certainly a I don't know. I really struggle to decide, is the current state of things really worse or better or just neutral
I remember
compared to the past.
when I was in college and the rise of the internet,
Uh-huh.
and like I had wrote a paper on the Declaration of Human Rights,
Mm-hmm.
and in that paper I forget what it was completely about, but I emailed the Census Bureau to provide me with statistics on certain things,
Oh yeah.
and they emailed me back with those statistics,
Wow.
and I'm like, holy crap, the internet is awesome. I now have access to primary sources,
Right. Right.
you know, whereas I didn't before. And so I was just enamored that with this wealth of information, everybody would have this information and everybody would really understand what's going on in a way that they didn't before. And what has happened since has been the complete opposite. And now there's so much noise out there, it's hard to determine what's not static and what's actual sound. And yeah, it's
Well, and I think
I am
that's-
reminded of I'm reminded of a story of an old lady who, after the fall of the Berlin Wall, came from East Germany and walked into a West German supermarket and was like, there's too much choice.
Uh-huh. I think I remember this story. I've heard this too. Yeah.
So, I mean, it's like, I was like, which by the way is what my feeling was when I first walked into Wegmans.
and now you're a convert.
I'm a convert. I can't get out of there without eating pizza and wings.
Yep. I mean,
I wonder if like the New York Wegmans has Old Bay wings.
yeah. I'm going to guess no. I'm going to guess
Probably
that's a
not.
regional thing. A lot of people outside of Maryland just really actually hate Old Bay. Like, cannot stand the smell or taste. I don't know.
Yeah.
I guess I don't necessarily disagree, but I would extend your suggestion that there's so many more avenues.
Those people who don't like Old Bay aren't my friends.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, I guess I could probably say the same thing. Just like that's just simple math, I guess. But I mean, it's also that, just like you said in your first sentence, that national and world events have been moving at a very fast clip, seemingly accelerating every day.
Yeah.
There's only so much time you can spend digging into a subject, into an article anymore before the next thing happens.
Yeah.
And
I like NPR's Wait, Don't Tell Me.
Yeah.
I have to admit, I mean, it's I get to hear all the stories that I missed.
Yeah.
About
those exploding maple trees.
That was an April Fool's story.
Yeah, I know. Still pretty good though.
Yeah. Gotta tap the sap or else
the maple's gonna explode. All the Vermont maple tree farmers
were Japanese table syrup.
Right. Oh man, that was pretty good. But yeah, I mean, I think they.
No, I'm gonna. How hard it's gonna be for me to find that to link to reference that.
You found it before.
Yeah, it took a while.
Fair enough. All right. Well, so going back to my question, so what would you say to those on the outside who have not experienced it from the inside? Like if you were a complete outsider, a foreigner.
I'd love to hear their perspective.
Yeah.
For so long, America, protected Western Europe, and they looked to America for leadership, and they looked for America for protection. And that's why Greenland was so troubling, because, all these nations deployed troops to Greenland to protect them from us. And what have we become? What have we become? And I say that in a way that it isn't that I don't love this country, because I do deeply. But I feel like this country needs to be introspective at this point and take a step back and just say, what are we doing? Because I feel like we are lost as a country, and we need to find our way again. America was just as much of an idea as it was a nation with borders, and that idea is gone.
Yeah.
It's what a hockey team says, what's our identity? So what is our identity?
Yeah.
And I know people on the right have been wrestling with this for a while. I mean, that's why the whole immigration debates come up. What is our identity? Because America is changing demographically.
Sure.
But I feel like America's always changed demographically. And a lot of people are xenophobic, and they get very uneasy when they hear Spanish. Me, being a monolinguist, unless you count Pig Latin.
Maybe 1.5 linguist. I don't know.
But I mean, I just feel like I'm left out of a good thing, and I want to be part of it, and I wish I had learned Spanish, because I feel like I always want to be part of a future. I don't want to be left behind. And it's so strange, because many of the people who are intimidated by hearing another language spoken in America, they are also not wanting to be left behind, and I think that's also at the root of it. So I feel that in regards to immigration, you can only be as welcoming to somebody who's not like you as you can be flexible within your own soul. There's a quote.
That's a good quote. Yeah. Feel pretty good about it?
I feel pretty good about that one.
Yeah. No, you should. Yeah. That was a good quote.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like that is the real, if I can share my opinion a little bit, I feel like that's the real struggle. The real American struggle is to define even what identity is.
Yeah.
Because it's changed so much, and I feel like that's actually, I mean, honestly, maybe it really hasn't. But the way that America has been able to assimilate people, willingly or unwillingly, into the American identity, I think has been one of our great challenges.
Yeah,
really,
it always has been.
Yeah.
I also just want to say one last thing about Hispanic people. The more Hispanic people I know, the more I really appreciate how much of a beautiful, sweet, and caring people they are.
Mhm.
And that's the sort of thing, I want to be part of, and so that's why I kind of more not learning Spanish in high school. I feel like there's a whole section of America
Sure.
I could connect to.
Yeah.
And maybe the Super Bowl appearance, of Bad Bunny, kind of brought that out. These are very positive people, and you're missing out on it. You're missing out on the party. Yeah, that's pretty much what I really wanted to say. What was your question again? I don't know
that I think I made a statement, and then
what was your statement again?
No, I was just making a statement about how I feel like assimilating peoples of different backgrounds.
Yeah. Okay. So I remember what I was about to say before squirrel. People also need to realize that, America has always been changing.
Yeah.
So even from the founding, I mean, the colonists were actually immigrants, and then we brought indentured servants and slavery and all that. And so we've always had a mix of different races, different cultures coming in. And there's always been a question of whether or not we are a melting pot or a mixing bowl.
Right.
A melting pot, everything melts together and forms an alloy. A mixing bowl's a salad.
Right.
Everybody keeps their own culture. You have Chinatown, you have, Little Havana or whatever. Are we a mixing bowl in that aspect? And that, there are cultural pockets and little pockets of cultural identity. I think it's a combination of the two myself.
Yeah. I mean, when you get down to
it, like in Frederick, Maryland, German was spoke in Frederick, Maryland until 1840, only 20 years before the Civil War. For the longest time, Frederick was bilingual between German and English.
Right.
You look at the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. Anytime where there will be a double S, you don't see a double S. You see that weird F.
It's like
thing. That's from German.
Right.
We've always been in flux. Our culture's always been in flux.
Yeah.
And heck, everybody wants to be Irish on St. Patrick's Day. I mean, and we're cool with that.
Right.
If we can celebrate Irish culture, we can celebrate Cinco de Mayo.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a celebration of people and what they bring to us.
Yeah.
Just don't drink Bass on St. Patrick's Day. Don't drink English beer on St. Patrick's Day.
You once got on my case for drinking Bass on the 4th on Independence Day.
Yes, I did.
But you know what? You kind of got the last laugh because Bass went out of business.
Bass went out of business?
Yeah, they don't exist anymore. Yeah, a few years ago.
That was a good beer.
I know. I was so upset. It was probably one of my favorites.
Oh, man.
Yeah. Sorry.
Hang on. I got to see that crap.
Yeah, go.
Yeah, with the red triangle?
Yep. I think they went out like during COVID. Like it was 2022 or something like that.
Yeah, it's still brewed. It's still around.
Where?
Oh, I don't know.
I haven't been able to find it at all. I swear I looked this up.
Let me go to the wiki page. Hang on. You might be right. I mean, it seems like the history just kind of ends, but it doesn't say it was shut down or anything like that. I mean, they might have lost the distributor, but I think it's still around.
Maybe that is what it is. I need to just travel
but
more.
You never put the Bass and the Guinness side by side in the refrigerator. They'll fight, and you'll have
spilt beer all over the place. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, but like speaking of, like the United States originally was all East Coast. There was no,
Oh yeah,
like people who live
Frontier.
in the heartland and say like they're the this is the heart of America. Like
The
that
frontier
wasn't
was Braddock Mountain. It was like
right.
the first set of mountains west of Frederick. It was the Blue Ridge,
Yeah.
the Shenandoah,
right.
And that was like
Didn't
even during the
include Florida.
Revolution.
Anybody in Florida who thinks like
Yeah, that was Hispanic. That was Spanish.
Right.
That was Spanish.
But that, I mean, I think we are better for having included, those, expanding and
another weird thing about immigration.
Yeah.
The immigrants here coming up, are they descendants of Spanish conquistadors, or are they descendants of native peoples down there?
I think it's both.
Native peoples to the continent.
I can't remember. I saw a statistic on this. It's like the vast majority of them, of people in Central or South America, have heritage back to both Spanish conquistadors and native peoples.
Yeah. So if you take the native people side, isn't really this illegal immigration issue that peoples of who are native to this continent are taking their lands back? In a grand scheme of things,
I mean, like you could stretch history back, to infinity almost, really.
Yeah.
So, but this kind of like going back to my questions. So you picked World War II, right, as kind of your starting point.
Yes, because that's the change of world order.
Okay, so all right. So I guess that answers my question. But why not the Cold War?
Well, the Cold War came out of World War II, and like there are certain parts of World War II, that were only recently ended. Like I think it was like during the 80s or 90s or whatever that like Japan and Russia finally came to a peace treaty. And so like there's leftover vestiges of World War II.
Yeah.
That have to have the I's dotted and T's crossed.
I think the last emperor of Japan only recently passed. I think it was in like the 2000s.
Hirohito.
Yeah.
Last Emperor of China. That's a good movie, by the way. Last Emperor.
Yeah.
Critter Collection.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a interesting life. But anyway, I mean, it's World War II shaped the Cold War. So you basically had, American and Western troops marching east, and you had Russia marching west. Right. And where they just never really went home. They just set up camps facing each other. And, across the borders and all that. And you had little pockets here and there where, like Berlin, surrounded by East Germany, and so you wound up having like the Berlin airlift, and they had, to keep everybody alive during those times. It was very tense times.
Yeah.
And both nations were nuclear armed.
Yep.
And, there's so many things that are alluded to in this essay that I don't go into detail. Like, for instance, as horrible as Hiroshima and Nagasaki are, that level of nuclear weapon would only be considered a tactical nuclear weapon.
Right.
And there's open talk on whether or not, especially with AI war games, what they've found that AI is fine using tactical nuclear weapons.
Right.
It isn't considered crossing the nuclear threshold, as far as AI is concerned. And I think Russia kind of feels that way too. They haven't used it, but they've thought about it. And just because, they kind of view tactical nuclear weapons differently than everything else. And it's the West that doesn't consider it's either nuke or no nuke. It isn't class that matters. So it's strange because, I mean, if you take a look at photos of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, I mean, the destruction is just incredible. Absolutely. I mean, it isn't entire blocks, flattened. It's larger than that, know. And then you have the destruction, past the fireball. You got the shockwave and all that crap. And I had mentioned that the world is changing because the keepers of the world have passed away. I said that like last season sometime. And the World War II generation has passed away. They saw that, they knew that. They taught Generation Xers about the destruction of these weapons. And I'm not sure if Generation Z or Alpha has any appreciation for the destructive power of the arsenals that we have,
Yeah.
and therefore whether or not they have the cognitive means to prevent humanity from using them, because it's just a page in a history book. It's a paragraph. Every paragraph is filled with hundreds of thousands of lives.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, as a Zennial or sometimes millennial, I'll say like I feel like nuclear arms testing was still still happening.
Yeah.
China tested their first nuclear weapon after I had been born. India, Pakistan, and it wasn't even though the nuclear test ban treaty dictated that you couldn't do above ground nuclear arms tests. I still remember vividly like seeing the video that China had captured of their underground nuclear arms test, and I mean it was still pretty striking, like
Yeah.
enough to scare you into thinking we should not have these. Like these should not exist.
Yeah. So I just like went ahead and looked up something.
Yep.
So Little Boy, which was the bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima,
Right.
was a 20 kiloton of TNT blast. So it's a 20 kiloton bomb.
Right.
Sarabama.
Yeah, it was something like 50 plus megatons or something like that.
Sarabama was between 50 and 57 megatons.
Megatons. Millions of tons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not kilotons, million tons. It
Yeah.
was 1,500 times more powerful.
Yep.
I think that was probably the one that decided to, we should negotiate not doing this.
Yeah.
Open air nuclear testing. Who knows what they've developed since?
Yeah.
Sarabama was what, like in the 60s. And who knows how much they've perfected the blast.
Well, to be honest, I'm not sure they've gone much beyond that in terms of, but I was learning recently about neutron bombs.
Yeah.
If you want to hear about the
that's all
terrible,
radiation, right? To leave the structures intact.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, pretty
yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah. Let's just kill everybody in the city, leave the city intact, so
so we can go
just
take over
and
there's no like radioactive fallout because all
that's nuts.
Yeah. It basically just instantly radiates everyone within some like a few kilometers or something, and immediately killing them. And but there's no radioactive fallout.
Yeah.
And so you can just wipe out everyone in a region, go claim the territory, and
Yep. How are you in your questions?
I've gotten through like
3 of them.
4 or 5.
4 or 5.
So
all right, let's go on, my friend. Let's go on.
All right. So so you picked World War II as the kind of the last time the world order really, we adopted the current world order.
Yeah.
So then in looking at the past or viewing the present through the lens of the past, how would you say the world order is shifting?
I feel like we're going from, during the Cold War, we had a bipolar world where it was the United States and it was like Washington and Moscow, playing chess against each other.
Right.
And it provided some stability, even though like other nations, was definitely the squares that were in play, where lots of battles were taking place, whether it be Hungary, whether it be Israel and 6-Day War and all that, because a lot of the Arab nations got Soviet equipment and we backed Israel. Angola. You had the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Yeah.
You had, and there are other things like Israel and South Africa working together on a bomb. How's that for a weird pairing?
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. Which they got.
Right.
South Africa would give up their nuclear program, but I think they did detonate something together in the Indian Ocean.
Yeah, I think details are kind of like disputed about, so it's questionable whether Israel actually is a nuclear power or not. But
yeah, it's I think it's an open secret.
Yes, yes, right. Like we don't have a nuclear weapon.
Yeah. He's totally winking for those on FM. We are going to like HD video on the audio band.
Right.
Like go total Star Trek.
Yeah.
Star Trek 4. That's a radio signal. How can you see the whales? But anyway,
yeah. Yeah.
But so the third world was definitely the chessboard. But from there, with the fall of the Berlin Wall and you had the Gulf War, for a little while it seemed to be a monopower.
Yeah.
But now it's like really becoming a tripole world, between Russia, China, and the United States. And Trump seems to be happy with, okay, let's go with spheres of influence like we did in the 1890s.
And you may be able to throw in India. There is an emerging,
but they
superpower.
And they are nuclear armed.
Yeah. But
at the same point in time, I don't know how much influence they're really trying to put forth in the world.
Yeah,
stage.
Sure. Certainly with as the most populous nation on Earth, I think there are 1.3 billion people now.
They're bigger than China?
They're bigger than China.
Wow.
Yeah. I think the one child policy is really starting to like kind of kick in.
Kill China. Yeah.
Or, people just aging out.
Basically. I know they fought 3 wars over the last century, India and China. And I think a few months ago, or maybe it was a year or 2 ago, I saw, you got to hand it to them, Chinese and Indian troops get into a massive fist fight at the border.
Uh-huh. Yeah, man, that whole border between the two of them is really nuts.
Really, it's like, wow.
Like there's like a barbed wire fence, nothing that would deter like the army of a major superpower. But
if you wanted to do MMA, I would think you want to listen to either the Chinese or Indian armies and get into some fist fights on the border.
Right. Some real life or death.
Yeah. No weapons.
Yep.
Old school gangs in New York street fight.
Yep.
People
snapping their fingers.
Yeah.
Sharks and jets.
But it's But so I think we're in a tripolar world now, and or at least that's what it seems to be evolving to. And NATO is now the chessboard. They're kind of caught in the middle. And it's weird because Trump has been, you got to pay your NATO dues, even though they're not really dues, they're just commitments to defense in terms of GDP. And, well, got them doing it because they don't trust NATO nations no longer trust the United States.
Right.
And they're realizing they're kind of caught between 2 spheres of influence, and they got to defend themselves. So, Trump wants 5%. They're like, yeah, I think that's a good idea because they know that, well, the United States is even putting up 5%, but they got to defend themselves potentially on 2 fronts, which is a really, really, really sad
state of
affairs. Especially when you look up, especially when, as you're reading the essay, you see how close Europe and the United States were. And who are we?
Yeah.
Who are we? Why are we doing this? You know?
Well, you mentioned the UN, and I suppose I should have like broached this at the closer to the start of the interview, but you seem to have a maybe deeper than surface level understanding of the UN more than certain. Like I have barely a surface level understanding of how the UN functions.
Yeah.
I know there's a council. I know there's the Security Council,
Yep.
and all of that. But you talk a little bit about like the Universal Declaration of Human Rights.
Yeah.
Right. So
That's a nice document.
where, when did you learn about this?
I've learned about it.
What was
in
your
college.
interest?
Yeah. And that's I came across it in college while I was writing a sociology paper.
Was this something you were interested in before,
Well, I wanted to read about human rights.
Yeah. Okay.
And when I came across this, I kind of realized, well, you know what, human rights, since this is a founding document, I mean, I know it doesn't necessarily have any power, but it really, since it's a founding document of the United Nations, it really is. These principles are like the basis of international law.
Right. Kind of like our Declaration of Independence.
Kind of like the Declaration of Independence. It strives to be the Bill of Rights, but it's not. I don't think it. You can't like refer to the Declaration of Human Rights to veto a treaty. I don't think.
Mm-hmm.
But it is a founding document on what the United Nations aspired to.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I'll put it that way. So just bring it up. Do a very quick run through of it. So like Article 1 is all human beings are born free in dignity and rights. They are endowed with reason and conscience and should act towards one another in a spirit of brotherhood. Obviously, I mean, I feel like there's a lot there that parallels, the Declaration of Independence, that we are born with inalienable rights.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like alluding to that right off. Yeah, Article 2 is reaffirms that.
Yeah.
Article 3, everyone has the right to life, liberty, and the security of the person.
Interesting. Security of the person. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
John unlocked.
Yeah.
He's such a running joke in this podcast.
Yeah, he is.
No one shall be held in slavery or servitude. Slavery and slave trade shall be prohibited in all their forms. No one shall be subjected to torture or cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment or punishment. I mean, obviously, so many nations who are in the United Nations don't adhere to this, but
right.
It has no power. But it's definitely a declaration of principle.
Yeah, certainly.
All are equal before the law. Let's see here. Let's find another good one. No one shall be subjected to arbitrary arrest, detention, or exile. Everyone is entitled to equality in a fair and public hearing by an independent and impartial tribunal. We said this was long, so I'm fine with that time.
Yeah.
And there's like literally, wow, there's 30 articles to this. So I just went through 5 of these.
Yeah, okay.
But it lays a good foundation, like education. It talks about education in Article 26, that everybody has a right to that. Everybody has a right to work in Article 23. Just laying down foundations of what is expected to be in a nation.
Right.
Yeah. But yep.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So you learned all of this, I assume, as part of this. Yeah, for your.
Yeah, well, I realized at that point that it isn't just my dignity isn't just found at the Bill of Rights; it's also found in the international level too.
Yeah. Okay.
And so that was just kind of a light bulb moment. I went from 60 watt to 100 watt there.
Yeah. All right. Well, so okay. I mean, I really don't have anything more on that, but so you mentioned you'd grown up. 73, born in 73, grew up through the 70s, 80s, 90s, I guess. So growing up during the Cold War, what were your impressions, setting aside your kind of inside outside looking in thing, what were your impressions of other countries? What were your impressions of the USSR?
See, my dad always told me that Americans are hated everywhere. Don't ever go outside the country.
Right.
And I don't think that's really true.
Yeah.
I mean, it might be more true now, especially how we've acted over the last 10 years. But
I don't know if hate though is probably still too strong a term.
I remember when we traveled to Ireland, it was really cool. I mean, the architecture's different and everybody was friendly. I swear I could have gotten mugged there and the thief would have told me directions to the nearest police station.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody, it was that friendly, and it was just like amazing. I disgraced America in Dublin, by the way.
How's that? I doubt you were the first person.
I drove through the traffic circle.
Oh.
Like through it. I mean, there wasn't like a raised curb or anything. It was just lines on the road.
Okay.
And I just went straight through.
Did you see the lines, or were just like, fuck it? Or you you just didn't see it?
I mean, the signage is so different overseas.
Yeah, okay.
So I was I wish I had taken an international driver's course, you know, if one's offered.
Yeah.
You know, in the end, after that experience, we just took the bus everywhere because I'm like, yeah, I'm safer on the highway.
Right.
I'm not necessarily okay driving around the city.
Right.
But yeah, I totally disgraced America.
And hence why we're at war with Ireland.
Thank God we aren't.
Yeah, no kidding. Okay, so like, or you wouldn't say you had an especially negative impression of anybody per se.
No.
So I mean, like, it may be fair to say that people outside the U.S. don't necessarily have an especially strong negative opinion of us.
Of us, yeah. I think they might have opinions of our government.
Sure.
But I think they don't have any problems with us as a people.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
I mean, and as many, as jokes as we make about other countries, I don't have a problem with anybody there. You can't blame somebody for where they're born, but rather, if you have problems with where they're born, you know what? Maybe you should get to know them and understand how they deal with life. And you might find, some resilience or some wisdom there that you can apply to your own, because they're dealing with different circumstances, so they can provide a different perspective.
Right. I think go ahead.
I think people are just a resource that are underutilized. Our diversity is a resource that's underutilized.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I agree. I totally agree. I was reminded a lot now, but also like throughout your essay, I was reminded a lot of the quote by Winston Churchill, which I think is a very good. It may be misattributed. I was looking this up before we started, but it is. You can always count on America to do the right thing after they have tried everything else.
Yes, that's a great quote.
Yeah,
that's a good one. I've heard that before, and I'm like, I'm going to tuck that in my back pocket.
Yep.
It's back there. But yeah, it's a good one.
Yeah. So apparently he may not have ever actually said it.
Oh,
I know it is a little bit disappointing, but he may have said it. It just was like never. It doesn't appear in any of his writings. It wasn't in any of his recorded speeches. Yeah. So he may have like maybe said this casually or something. We really don't know. This is lost to history.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I think if I were a foreigner looking at the state of the United States today, I would think this quote would stand out.
Yeah. And this isn't to say that, what we're doing with Iran right now. I mean, I think there are a lot of people in Iran are very happy that this regime might be on the verge of falling.
Yeah.
But I think everybody's also worried about, like with Iraq, we didn't have a plan for what came after.
Right.
And like right now, I mean, there's now talk of ground troops.
Yeah.
Which shows that how badly planned this is, because if you really wanted to topple the regime, well, that's the decision that should have been made months ago.
Yeah.
And we should have had a game plan for that. So if you don't even have a game plan for, how you're going to topple the regime, I know you don't have a plan for how to maintain order after, how to win the peace. And I think a lot of people in Iran are scared of what comes after, because it's for them, the bombing might stop one day, but the worst may still be yet to come, because they're going to be living in this power vacuum.
Right.
And we aren't. And it's just going to be something we see on TV.
Yeah.
And then, Americans will go about their lives, but they'll be dealing with hell.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So before I get to the final question.
Already?
Already? What are you talking about?
I figured that, you still probably had like 5 or 6 questions to go.
No. Well, I think I've pretty much covered most of them,
covered
actually.
Everything? Okay.
Yeah, actually, I guess I have two more before the
I
final.
thought you had
Yeah.
a couple.
All right. So beyond the headlines, what do you hope people abroad will see in us?
I hope that they see that we're still the same people, but and that our government is really erratic. I hope that they don't judge us, for our actions. What's that Ted Lasso quote? Either all of us or none of us are judged by
Right.
our worst moments.
Right. Yeah. Great quote.
Yeah.
A lot of really great ones from that show. But
yeah. I mean, we are more than our politics, and I hope that Americans understand that too. We are more than our foreign policy. We're more than our military.
Yeah.
There's a lot of military worship here, which, I mean, I get that, they've made much sacrifices for, which I am incredibly grateful for.
Mm-hmm.
But when somebody comes back from a deployment and goes to church, should the church applaud?
Sure.
I have serious qualms about that.
Yeah.
I feel like, your patriotism and your worship of God should be kept separate.
Mm-hmm.
When the two mix, I feel that usually helps bring more. And that's a whole nother essay right there.
Sure. Yeah.
That I think is rooted in scripture in terms of the abomination that causes desolation, where a political figure takes place because the politics and the religion have mixed.
Yeah.
And, oddly enough, I feel that, a lot of foreign policy is probably from the Left Behind series. But in fact, I sent you something about, about, an American military official talking about, Armageddon and Trump being divine.
Yes.
Divinely appointed.
Yeah.
He's King Saul. He's the Lord's appointed, apparently. So anyway, I am off track of the topic, but I hope people from the outside see in us. I hope that they help us remember that America's an idea. I hope that they still see our optimism. And I hope that they can help remind us of who we are, even though I feel like we've lost our way. Still not quite answering the question, but I kind of feel like we need them at this point. I feel like that's a lot of the interview was, talking about how we need people outside of ourselves to help us through and help us become better.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting sentiment.
Yeah.
Well, so then, now my second to last question. What, like, projecting out like 6 years from now? Okay. So not next year, not the year after, 6 years plus.
Wow.
6 years. What do you think?
That's like 100 years, like just
I know. I feel like I'm struggling just to get to next year, let alone
next
6
month. Yeah.
But what do you think the state of our politics will be in that time? What'll improve? What'll be the same? What'll be different?
I feel that we'll probably be in the midst of a national reckoning.
Yeah.
And I think it'll be a very hard time, as much as it'll be good in the long run. It's because it's well needed, but it's going to be a hard time to go through.
Sure. Yes.
Because, I feel like there's a Battlestar Galactica quote I could definitely bring in from the miniseries from Adama's speech about there comes a time when he can't run from the things that you've created anymore, or something along those lines.
Yeah, I think I vaguely remember this. Yeah.
Yeah. And I just basically feel like a lot of our chickens are coming home to roost.
Yeah.
And you can see the beginnings of it because the MAGA base, I feel, is beginning to fracture. Trump is getting less and less support at home.
Mm-hmm.
Americans aren't for this war with Iran. It's not America first. Americans have seen, impeachment hearings against Biden because his son made $1 million off of his name, whereas Trump has made $4 billion in the last year while in the office of the presidency and not a damn word. there's a lot of reckoning that has to happen. There's a lot of accountability that has to occur. And there's going to be reclamations and claims of witch hunt and saying this is all political when we're just trying to get some accountability, and you just want to get some accountability across the board.
Yeah. Yeah. Fair enough.
And it's going to be a hard time because, the biggest fear I have is whether or not the military will split and all the implications that happens with that.
Yeah. Yeah. Scary.
So, yeah, it is scary. I think we're going through some scary times ahead.
Yeah. Fair enough. All right. So final question, but I'm going to phrase this a little bit differently than we normally do. So for Child Abroad reading your essay, what do you want them to take away from this?
Ooh.
For the middle schooler.
So in college, I read a book called The Yellow Wind. And it was about a sociologist who studied the dreams of both Israeli children and Palestinian children growing up. And both of them had fears of monsters, where the other one was the monster. So that's the first thing that my mind goes to. I don't think the book was really about that. It was about Israeli-Palestinian relations, but it mentioned that. And so my message to children, wow. You are the future. History isn't just a topic that you learn in school or in college. History is people's logic. It's their feelings. It's what they carry with them into the present. And so you really need to be aware of history in order to deal with somebody honestly and where they're at. And when you don't do that, you can sow seeds of distrust. So be educated, be sincere, and be humble.
Well said.
Yeah.
So feared or loved?
Feared or loved. We never even got to the movie quote.
Well, so you've seen The Office.
I've seen The Office. You know what? I didn't watch the episode. I saw the segment.
You saw the segment?
I saw the segment.
Yeah, so
this is
one of my most favorite quotes from the show. I got a birthday card with this quote, one of those audio cards from my wife or something for Father's Day. I don't remember. Would you rather be feared or loved? And he says, easy, both. I want people to be afraid of how much they love me.
Yes. Exactly.
So I'll leave my,
which is on one hand sounds like so egotistical, but on the other hand is like there's definitely an undercurrent of people pleasing there.
Yes. Oh, sure.
Yeah.
A lot of layers.
Statement. A lot of layers to that statement.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, buddy. I got nothing else.
All right. Very good. Well, good talk. Good discussion.
Yeah. Great essay. Loved reading it.
It was definitely a complex one.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Complex topic. Definitely not bumper sticker.
Nope.
All right, everyone. Well, I guess at this point we should probably start cueing the theme music, but please like, subscribe, give us feedback.
Yes.
Come to the website, www.theascendantproject.com. Yeah, tell us what we're doing right. Tell us what we're doing wrong. And, if you subscribe, by all means, if I see it, I will definitely shoot you an email. Thank you for coming on board.
Yeah.
And that way, that'll be another way for you to give me feedback or whatnot. But that's it. You guys have a great day.
Yeah, have a great one.
You have been listening to The Ascendant Project. The Ascendant Project is a production of Monocacy Audio, LLC. Any information expressed in this podcast is not intended to be a substitute for expert information. We are human and ordinary people. And as a result, what is presented as fact may be in error. Monocacy Audio, LLC and this podcast hold no liability from events or damages that result from listening to or reading this podcast or its associated materials. All articles, interviews, and sound files are copyright Monocacy Audio LLC with all rights reserved, except our awesome theme music is by Alexei Chitalin. His music can be found on pixabay.com as well as Spotify underneath the pseudonym Lexin Music. Thank you for listening and have a great day.